Hi guys, I'm going to be doing another movie review now, but this one is going to be a history movie review, so hopefully you enjoy this one. This is one of my favourite history movies that has come out over the last couple of decades, and really enjoyed this movie when it first came out. And this review is going to be on the movie Apocalypto, which is a 2006 movie directed by Mel Gibson. Not an awful lot of famous names who starred in the movie, but the main character is played by a gentleman by the name of Rudy Youngblood. So this movie is roughly 2 hours and 15 minutes. It is spoken entirely in Yucatan Mayan, which is fantastic. You know, you've got a lot of people who participated in the film, indigenous people from Central and South America, which is superb for the cast, gives it that level of authenticity. But before I start, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, give me a comment about what you thought of the film, if you've seen the film as well, and if you can, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be doing a lot more of these history reviews, and would like to see if I can get your support while I go ahead and review the books as well then, okay? But just to kick it off, so like I say, this film is directed by Mel Gibson, out of the blocks. I think he's a fantastic director. I love some of his movies. Passion of the Christ is absolutely superb. I really enjoyed that movie. I know it's a bit of a Debbie Downer of a topic, but I thought that was fantastic. He's a really gifted director. As much as he is a controversial figure from what he said, I mean, you know, he's not once but twice he's carried on and started abusing people, particularly people of the JEWs, you know, or every single time. But listen, you know, he's been ostracized by Hollywood, you know, safe to say. So but anyways, whilst he was still the hot ticket and a bit of a golden boy, it's nice to enjoy some of the movies that he was doing, and namely this one, Apocalypto. So really, I've always wanted to see a film. When I started to become really interested about history when I was in secondary school, it was noticeable even as a kid that there's a lot of movies that we are exposed to in the West where there's nothing at all from, nothing at all from the other side of the sort of the voyages of conquest, or the voyages of discovery, or the discovery of the new world. Is nothing at all from the other side. It's all Eurocentric, and I think that was very noticeable even as a young boy and a teenager as well, studying it. This was, I would say, one of my favourite topics in school, which was voyages of discovery, and also the settlement of the new world as well. But this actually takes place, I think this film takes place around, say, 1500. So this is set in the Yucatan Peninsula. So the Yucatan Peninsula is actually in South America, part of Mexico, but also part, you know, it also encompasses Central American countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras as well. That sort of that area there is South and Central America. So this was a massive critical success at the time. People lauded it. The authenticity that the film had was absolutely superb. And on IMDb, it has got a 7.8 rating, which was a lot lower than what I thought. I thought this was going to be up about 8.3, 8.4. But you know, 7.8 isn't bad at all. I mean, there are some, there are not many drawbacks to the movie, but it is, it is a really enjoyable movie at that. So what I liked about the movie, so let me just give you the summary of the movie first of all. So the movie opens up. You've got a young guy. The name of the character is Jaguapo. So he and his group are sort of like a suburb, or they're an outside group living in the jungles of Central America. They are part of the extended sort of Mayan speaking family, the Mayan speaking peoples. They don't live in Tikal or Chichen Itza, the sort of the capitals or the central cities, central hubs of the Mayan civilization. But what I really liked about the film was the authenticity, and I've read quite a lot about the Mayans, and what you see in the film and what Gibson has done, and the researchers, and the hats off have to go to them. The level of detail in the language spoken, first of all, is superb. Then you've got the costumes, which are unbelievable. It literally looks like you're there witnessing this prior to the Spanish arrival, which is unbelievable. This pre-Columbian sort of this pre-Columbian civilization. I really enjoyed the fact that we don't have a we don't have a film which a lot of, say, films in the 90s in particular sort of showed this noble savage type sort of explanation about what pre-Columbian Indians, what pre-Columbian natives were like. You've had in the past, in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, a lot of sort of Western movies, John Wayne types, you know, where they sort of denigrated natives, denigrated native culture, you know, and I think it flipped a lot in the 80s and 90s, particularly with Kevin Costner's movie, was it 1992 movie, it was Dancing with Wolves. And then you've got Pocahontas, the Disney movie in 1996, and they really play upon this sort of noble savage. Everything was sweet, everything was nice, everybody was eating squash and sweet potatoes and living in long houses, and everything was fine and everyone got on and nothing happened. There was no sort of strip mining of this mineral. There was no concept of money before, you know, the sort of Europeans turned up. There was no devastation. There was no. What this film does is show in the most grittiest of aspects that these civilizations were like every other civilization, human. They were incredibly violent. They were incredibly complex. They had their own hierarchical systems. The traits of every human civilization, whether it's Western, whether it's ancient, whether it's Eastern, they take on the. What makes it interesting between these civilizations is the very few differences that we have, and we recognise each civilization by the very few differences we have. But what I liked in this movie was it doesn't shy away from the fact that the Mayans in particular, you know, were a very violent people, but they had a different sort of, I wouldn't say moral compass, or a different belief system which enabled our violence to be either accepted or tolerated on a certain level. So what I mean by that is, going back to the movie, is that the movie opens with this young boy living in a community on the outskirts of the main Mayan civilization. They are raided by what looks like slave catchers, or they're more of like a raiding party from the main Mayan capital, whether it's Chichen Itza or Tikal, I don't know, but one of the main Mayan cities. And what it looks like is that they're going through a bit of a trauma at the time. There's a bit of a pestilence going on. So as the people in the group are being taken away from their homes and taken into the city to be sacrificed, to be used as workers, you can see, and what I enjoyed about the movie is that Gibson shows you that sort of direction all the way through from the outskirts in. It reminds me really a lot about when, if you remember the film Gladiator with Russell Crowe, when the gladiators go from the outskirts and the provinces of Rome into Rome itself and the Colosseum. That journey where you get to see the city in all its brilliance, in all of its splendor, but then all of its, you know, sort of violence, all of its sort of realness, the sort of reality of what life was like there. And I think that sort of authenticity lends itself again to Apocalypto. So as they're going into the city, you see what I like the small things that they've done in the film. The presence of the really opulent women wearing jade, the colour jade, which was highly sought after, particularly by the aristocratic elite within the Mayan civilization. You see later on the priest. They call themselves the people of the banner of the sun. They are sun worshippers, and you see the leader, or the king, or the chief with jade across his nose. and piercings on the lip, piercings on the ear, a lot of jade is there. So not gold, unlike what the Spanish thought when they turned up they wanted, which was the gold. So jade was the highly sought colour, and any emblem with jade was highly sought after in the civilization. You see a lot of people building temples, building structures, and there's a white powder where you see that they go in through, and people coughing blood up, which is the limestone. So they limestone in the buildings, which even today some of the temples and the pyramids, which are preserved in Central America and in Mexico, are some of the best preserved in the world. Not an awful lot have that outside limestone on it, but that's very similar to Egypt and to temples found in China, similarly, and in Sudan with the pyramids, is that the limestone on them and the capped limestone, whereas in Central America they didn't tend to be capped with, say, an emblem. They were definitely limestoned on certain sides, which was a nice touch as well. Another thing which was really authentic and was very interesting when you read about the Spanish when they actually turned up to Central and South America, and when they conquered the Incas, was the sort of ideology of what warfare was fundamentally different from what the European invaders and conquistadors had. The European sort of mindset was to kill their enemy, make them flee, dominate a field battle, dominate an area, dominate a city, take strategic points. Now, whilst I was still there with the Mayans and with the Incas and the Aztecs, there wasn't so much as a premium on killing your enemy because they outnumbered them anyway. But even before the Spanish, the object of war wasn't so much to kill, but was also, you see, even in the makeup of their weapons was to not so much disembowel or dismember, but they were to disarm. They were to stop you in your tracks. A lot of weapons where you're cracking people over the head, but they're not necessarily killing them. Where you're breaking bones and joints and limbs, and then you're taking people, you're taking them away, and then you're either sacrificing them later on, or you are, taking them as slaves or servants. So that fundamental difference, particularly when the Spanish turned up with arquebuses, which are old-fashioned style muskets, pikemen, horses, cannon. These are instruments of death, instruments of killing. Whereas, the more indigenous people, for the earlier parts in particular, anyway, and what they shows in this movie is, they're not looking to kill. They want you. You serve a greater role by being alive and being sacrificed to the sun god for whatever reason. In this movie was to rid the city of pestilence. There is there is some sort of plague or some sort of either epidemic going around. You see a diseased young girl who sort of speaks to the main character and tells him what will be happening later on in the movie when he escapes. But we do see a scene in the movie as well where there's quite a vivid execution and sacrifice. So they're covered in blue paint, blue the color of sacrifice. I haven't read up on this in particular, but blue was the color, and the person will be laid over the altar, chest protruding, neck back, holding of the neck, cutting of the heart, and the heart would be there, shown as a sacrifice to the sun god before the sacrifice would be decapitated and the head rolls down the several steps of the pyramid, which is shocking to say the least. But this is what happened. I mean, even to go back in a comparable situation, when the Spanish turned up at Tenochtitlan, which is now modern day Mexico City, So when the Spanish turned up under Cortez, the Aztecs were actually going through, or had gone through and were going through, some of the biggest periods of sacrifice that had ever been recorded. And now information had been passed on to the Spanish when they arrived, and eventually when they conquered the area. And so this is not as if like this was a one-time thing. Oh, we'll do it once a month, or we'll do it. This happened quite regularly, and sometimes whether there was a crop failure, or whether there was something to do with a natural disaster, or there was a pestilence like seen in this movie, the numbers of sacrifices would increase and increase and increase until the people, mainly the aristocrats, mainly the sort of the leaders of the civilization, were satisfied enough, and that they could then convince the population that all is well, keep on going, keep on going. We've given the god what he desired. You go about your business, and he'll sort itself out. Anyway, but little things like that were really interesting, and eventually, so the second half of the movie, or the last third of the movie, becomes really a bit of a chase scene, effectively. So you've got a couple of the main kidnappers of the raiding party pursue Jaguar Paul, who's escaped from being a sacrifice on the main temple in the Mayan city, and he's going straight back to where he came from. He wants to go back to his settlement, but he's being pursued by the group that initially captured him and his people into sacrifice or into servitude. So it becomes a really good chase scene, really brutal. Reminds me an awful lot of the film Predator, so with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So when they're in the jungle and he's trying to sort of get away from the predator, or trying to entrap the predator with different sort of techniques, and trying to sort of lay booby traps everywhere. It does descend into that. Really small details about what we used at the time as well. So, for instance, there were like a hornet's nest and bees or wasps' nests. They were used by the indigenous people and thrown at the Spanish when they actually were on the battlefield as well, by the Incas, and so forth as well. So that is in record of being done. That was shown in the film, where the two of the chasers were pretty much covered in bites and stings after having a hornet's nest drop down on them. So very Predator-like sort of chase scene, and how he whittles them down one by one of this before he comes across his main enemy, which is the guy in the poster behind. This is the main pursuer of the main character in the movie, and he's fantastic looking costume. Everything from the tattoos to the facial piercings, everything. The actual sort of physique of the people as well, the mobility. People weren't built to be absolute units back then. They were built to hunt, to capture, to fight, and that was that. But another thing which really strikes me, a very similar type of vein that this movie is like the movie The Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis, in that you've got a sort of an adversary that needs to be dealt with whilst you've got the chase sequence going on. So the two movies I would say very similar to, that really feed into this one, is The Last of the Mohicans and Predator, strangely enough, as well. But what I would say, another film recommendation similar to Apocalypto, would be a film called Pathfinder. It didn't do too well in 2007 when it came out, and it was more of these ones which is kind of like, is it a straight to DVD film, or did it go to cinemas? We don't quite know. But the premise of the film was pretty interesting. It was in regards to the Vikings had sailed to North America and landed in, I think it's Canada or New England, and again, they as Vikings do, they raid, kidnap, they take treasure, and as they're on their way, as they're in the New World before they be able to set home, there is a similar story to Apocalypto there, where you've got a Native American who takes on the Vikings there as well. That's a really good film. I'd say check that out. That's not a It's not an Oscar winner by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something to chuck on if you feel as if you want a bit of an action film. But it has got a sort of a really good underlying current of history as well. Then I'd say pick Pathfinder up as well. So yeah. I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover on this video. I'll have a quick look a second just to see how do we do with the box office for Apocalypto. So there we are, 2006 it came out. So on a budget of 40 million, it tripled itself on its box office, which isn't too bad. I do remember that it wasn't an awful lot of there was no merchandising, there wasn't an awful lot of marketing for it, but I think the only sort of marketing really was for whether it would be considered Oscar worthy as well. I don't think that it did actually have any awards to say too much. Like certainly they didn't have any we've got nominated for Academy Awards, sound mixing, sound editing and makeup, but really nothing in the sense of best picture, best foreign language film or anything like that at all, unfortunately. But before I go, one of my favorite parts of the film is at the very end of the chase sequence, and the hero of the film, Jaguar Paw, is really he's pretty much got away from his adversaries. He's killed his main rival. There's a couple more pursuers behind him, but as he gets to the beach and the camera pans around and he's exhausted after running pretty much miles in the jungle, and the camera pans around and you see off the shore this massive what looks like a caravel type ship. So we're looking at around the time, say 1505. I can't remember when this area was discovered, but you see a small boat of Spanish coming across to meet them, and the two pursuers of Jaguar Paw actually go out to meet the Spanish, and that sort of nice little metaphor as well is the civilization meeting its destiny in everything that it was, in its complexity, in its violence, everything that it was. They go out to meet, and we know it's kind of like one of those movies where we know that not so much the bad guys win, but we know, they're going towards their doom. They're going towards the eventuality and the inevitability of history. So that was a very surprising touch at the end of the movie, but it was very, very interesting, and I thought that overall, it was a fantastic movie, and I'm going to give this movie 4 out of 5 stars. I think you can get this movie pretty much on any streaming platform. So you've got Amazon Prime. You may have to pay for it if it's on Sky Store. I haven't seen it on Netflix, but I'd certainly have a look at Amazon Prime first of all. But definitely if you can, this is a fantastic movie. 4 out of 5 stars. I probably would have given it a little bit more on second viewing, but I'm really sort of reserving the 4.5 and 5 stars for the best of the best, really. So this one, 4 out of 5. Again, like I said earlier, if you can like the video, share, subscribe to the channel for definite, and leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the movie as well. And if you've got any other recommendations you wanted me to